Wealthy man falls for a street vendor. His friend's reaction is unbelievable. Ethan adjusted his tie as he stepped out of the sleek black car onto the bustling street. The smell of roasted chestnuts mingled with the faint tang of exhaust fumes, creating an oddly nostalgic aroma. Around him, the city thrummed with life. Vendors called out to passing pedestrians, hawking everything from fresh produce to handmade trinkets. It wasn't a place Ethan frequented. His world was one of polished lobbies and high-rise offices. But something about today had drawn him here. He walked with measured steps, his polished shoes clicking against the uneven pavement. His friends trailed behind him, their laughter cutting through the hum of the street like a blade. Ethan barely noticed them, his attention inexplicably drawn to a small stall tucked between two larger ones. A young woman stood behind it, her hands deftly arranging a display of handmade bracelets. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her face, though plain, held a quiet determination that intrigued him. "Ethan, what on earth are you looking at?" Marcus, his oldest friend, clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, we're grabbing drinks at that new place uptown." Ethan barely glanced at him, his gaze fixed on the woman. "You guys go ahead. I'll catch up." Marcus exchanged a look with the others, a smirk playing on his lips. "Don't tell me you're actually interested in." He gestured toward the vendor dismissively. "This?" Ethan ignored the jab and stepped closer to the stall. The woman looked up, her dark eyes meeting his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the clear disparity in their worlds. Ethan picked up one of the bracelets, running his fingers over the smooth beads. "Did you make this?" "Yes," she replied simply. There was something in her tone, pride, perhaps, or defiance, that made him smile. "It's beautiful." Her lips twitched as if she wanted to smile back but thought better of it. "Thank you. Would you like to buy it?" He nodded, pulling out his wallet. As he handed her a crisp bill, their fingers brushed. It was a fleeting touch, but it sent a jolt through him that he couldn't quite explain. Behind him, Marcus and the others watched with barely concealed amusement. One of them, a tall man with a perpetual smirk, muttered something under his breath that sent the group into laughter. Ethan glanced over his shoulder, irritation flickering across his face. "Problem?" he asked, his tone sharper than he intended. Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender. "No problem at all. Just interesting choice, that's all." Ethan turned back to the vendor. "What's your name?" "Anna," she said after a brief hesitation. "And yours?" "Ethan." Her brow furrowed slightly, as though the name rang a bell. "Ethan?" "Just Ethan," he said, smiling again. She nodded, her expression unreadable, and returned to arranging her bracelets. Ethan lingered for a moment longer, then turned and walked away, ignoring the snickers of his so-called friends. As they moved farther down the street, Marcus fell into step beside him. "Seriously, Ethan? A street vendor? What are you trying to prove?" "I'm not trying to prove anything," Ethan said, his voice tight. "I just found her work interesting." "Sure," Marcus drawled. "You're not fooling anyone, you know? Guys like us don't mix with people like her." Ethan stopped abruptly, forcing Marcus to halt as well. "People like her? What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus held up his hands again, his smirk never wavering. "Relax, man. I'm just saying it's a different world. You can admire her little crafts, but don't get any ideas." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The group continued walking, their laughter grating on him more than usual. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse, a drink in hand. The city stretched out before him, its lights twinkling like stars against the darkened sky. He should have been thinking about the deal he had closed earlier that day, or the gala he was expected to attend next week. Instead, his thoughts kept drifting back to Anna, the way her eyes had met his without flinching, the quiet dignity in her posture, the fleeting warmth of her touch. He set his glass down with a sigh. This was ridiculous. He didn't know her, and yet she had unsettled something in him. Shaking his head, he resolved to put her out of his mind. But the following day, as he found himself walking the same streets, He realized that was easier said than done. Once again, he was drawn to her stall. She was there as before, her hands busy with her work. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. "You're back," she said. "Apparently," he replied, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Anna arched an eyebrow but said nothing, returning her attention to her bracelets. Ethan watched her for a moment before picking up a new piece from her display. "This one's different," he observed. "It's a new design," she said. "I finished it last night." "It's beautiful," he said, and he meant it. She glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. "Thank you." For the next few minutes, they spoke in halting conversation, Ethan asking about her work and Anna answering cautiously. She seemed guarded, but he couldn't blame her. Men like him didn't usually spend their time in places like this, and she likely wondered what his intentions were. When he finally left, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. Marcus and the others would probably mock him mercilessly if they knew he had returned to see her, but for once, he didn't care. Ethan found himself returning to Anna's stall the next day, and the day after that. It became a quiet ritual, a reprieve from the polished artifice of his usual life. Her stall was always in the same spot, a small splash of color and charm amidst the gray bustle of the city streets. Anna didn't seem surprised to see him anymore. She greeted him with a polite nod and continued her work, but she still kept her guard up, as if waiting for him to reveal some ulterior motive. "You don't have to keep coming here, you know," she said one afternoon, not looking up from the bracelet she was threading. "Maybe I like coming here," Ethan replied, leaning casually against the edge of her stall. Anna gave a soft snort. "A guy like you? You've got better places to be." Ethan tilted his head, intrigued. "And what do you think a guy like me is?" She glanced up at him, her dark eyes sharp. "Rich, polished, probably has a car that costs more than most people make in a year. Definitely not the kind of person who spends his afternoons at a street vendor's stall." He smiled, unoffended. "That's fair. But maybe a guy like me is tired of all that." Anna raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Ethan took her silence as permission to continue. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked. "Like everything you have, everything you do, is because someone else decided it for you?" Anna paused, her fingers stilling over the bracelet. "Not really. My life's pretty simple. Every choice I make is mine." "Must be nice," Ethan said softly. She shrugged, returning to her work. "It's not always easy, but at least I don't have to answer to anyone." Ethan watched her for a moment, the simplicity of her perspective a stark contrast to the tangled expectations and obligations that defined his world. He envied her in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "Why jewelry?" he asked, changing the subject. "Out of all the things you could sell?" Anna hesitated, as if deciding whether or not to answer. Finally, she said, "I used to make it with my mom. It was just a hobby back then, but when she got sick, it became a way to make money. After she passed," she trailed off, her gaze distant. "It was all I had left of her." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice gentle. Anna shrugged again, though her movements were tighter this time. "It's life. You take the bad with the good." Ethan nodded, unsure of what else to say. They fell into a comfortable silence, the noise of the street fading into the background as he watched her work. Later that evening, as Ethan returned to his penthouse, he found himself thinking about Anna's words. Her life wasn't easy, but it was hers. Every decision she made, every obstacle she faced, was on her terms. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt that way. His life was a series of carefully curated events, each decision scrutinized and influenced by the people around him. That thought lingered in his mind as he attended a lavish dinner party later that week. Marcus and the others were there, their laughter loud and their drinks flowing freely. Ethan listened to their conversations, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "You've been awfully quiet," Marcus said, nudging him with his elbow. "Something on your mind?" Ethan shook his head, forcing a smile. "Just tired." "Well, maybe this will wake you up." Marcus gestured toward a woman across the room, her gown shimmering under the chandelier lights. "Victoria's been asking about you. She's dying for an introduction." Ethan's smile tightened. Not tonight. Marcus frowned, clearly puzzled. You feeling okay? She's exactly your type. Maybe my type's changed, Ethan said, surprising even himself. Marcus studied him for a moment, then leaned in conspiratorially. This wouldn't have anything to do with that street vendor, would it? Ethan's stomach tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. What are you talking about? Oh, come on, Marcus said with a laugh. You think we haven't noticed? You've been sneaking off to see her every day. It's adorable, really. Ethan's jaw clenched. Leave it alone, Marcus. Relax. I'm just teasing, Marcus said, holding up his hands. But seriously, Ethan, what are you doing? She's not one of us. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What does that even mean? Marcus hesitated, clearly realizing he had hit a nerve. Look, all I'm saying is, people like her, they live in a different world. You're setting yourself up for a lot of unnecessary complications. Maybe I'm tired of living in this world. Ethan shot back, his voice low but firm. Marcus looked taken aback, but he recovered quickly, his smirk returning. Do whatever you want, man. Just don't say I didn't warn you. Ethan didn't respond. He spent the rest of the evening on autopilot, his thoughts consumed by Anna and the growing rift between him and the life he once thought he wanted. When he returned home that night, he stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Anna was probably asleep in her modest apartment, her life worlds apart from his. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that she understood him in a way no one else did. The next morning, Ethan found himself once again walking through the familiar maze of street vendors. He didn't question the compulsion anymore. It was as if Anna's stall had become a gravitational force he couldn't resist. The moment he approached, her eyes flicked up, recognizing him immediately. She didn't smile, but the corners of her mouth curved ever so slightly, a hint of acknowledgement she hadn't given before. You're persistent, she said, threading beads onto a thin wire. I've been told that, Ethan replied, leaning casually against the stall. But I could say the same about you. You're always working. That's what life is, Anna said simply. If you stop moving, you get left behind. Ethan nodded, her words hitting closer to home than he cared to admit. Do you ever get a break? She shook her head. Not really. I've got rent, supplies, and... She hesitated, glancing away. And what? Ethan pressed gently. Anna looked at him, her expression guarded. And a daughter, Chloe. She's 5. For a moment, Ethan was stunned. He hadn't expected this revelation, and yet it made perfect sense. There was a quiet strength in Anna that he now recognized as the resilience of a mother doing everything she could to provide for her child. She must be proud of you, Ethan said after a pause. Anna let out a soft laugh, though there was a hint of sadness in it. She doesn't understand it yet. She just wants me home more, and I want that too. But this is the only way I can keep things going. Ethan's chest tightened. He could see the toll it took on her, the weight of responsibility etched into her every movement. He wanted to help, to do something, anything, but he knew better than to offer charity. Anna wasn't the type to accept handouts, and he didn't want to insult her pride. Instead, he said, "You're doing something incredible. Chloe's lucky to have you." Anna met his gaze, her defenses softening just a little. Thanks. That means a lot. Ethan stayed longer than he intended, their conversation weaving between light banter and deeper confessions. By the time he left, he felt lighter, as though being around Anna had grounded him in a way he hadn't experienced in years. That evening, as Ethan sat at yet another dinner with Marcus and their friends, he found it harder and harder to ignore the growing gap between their worlds. The conversation drifted from yachts to private jets to the latest high-profile mergers, and Ethan realized how hollow it all felt. "So, Ethan," Marcus said, his tone dripping with faux curiosity, "how's your little street vendor friend?" The table fell silent, all eyes turning to Ethan. He set down his glass slowly, meeting Marcus's gaze with a calm that belied the anger simmering beneath the surface. "What about her?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. Marcus chuckled, clearly enjoying the attention. "I'm just curious what you see in her. I mean, come on. We all know this isn't going anywhere. And why is that? Ethan asked, his tone sharpening. Because, Marcus said, spreading his hands as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, she's not one of us. She doesn't belong in our world, and you don't belong in hers. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he refused to take the bait. Maybe it's not about belonging, he said. Maybe it's about finding something real. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by Ethan's candor. The others exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene. Real, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. What's real about a woman selling trinkets on the street? You're romanticizing something that's beneath you. Ethan stood abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping against the floor. You know what's beneath me? This conversation. Without another word, he walked out, leaving Marcus and the others staring after him in stunned silence. Ethan didn't stop walking until he was back in his car, the city lights blurring as he gripped the steering wheel tightly. He felt a surge of anger at Marcus, at himself, at the shallow world he had let himself be a part of for so long. But beneath the anger was something else, something he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. He cared about Anna. It wasn't just curiosity or a passing interest. He genuinely cared about her, her struggles, her dreams, her quiet strength. And for the first time, he realized he wanted to be a part of her world, not the other way around. The next day, Ethan arrived at Anna's stall earlier than usual. She looked up, surprised to see him so soon. Everything okay? She asked, her hands pausing mid-motion. Yeah, Ethan said, though his voice betrayed the weight of his thoughts. I just wanted to see you. Anna raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical but amused. You're full of surprises. You know that? Ethan chuckled, running a hand through his hair. You have no idea. They fell into their usual rhythm, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan found himself telling her things he hadn't shared with anyone, about his father's expectations, the suffocating weight of his privileged life, the longing for something more. And Anna, in turn, opened up about her late mother, her dreams of opening a boutique, and her fears of not being enough for Chloe. By the time the sun began to set, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Marcus or anyone else dictate how he felt about Anna. She was worth more than all the shallow trappings of his old life, and he was determined to prove it. Not just to her, but to himself. Ethan's resolve only grew stronger in the days that followed. His visits to Anna's stall became more frequent, not just because he enjoyed her company, but because he felt like he was rediscovering a part of himself he had long buried. With Anna, there was no pretense, no games. She saw him for who he was, not for his wealth, not for his status, but for the man underneath it all. But his growing attachment didn't go unnoticed. One morning, as he arrived at Anna's stall, she was already waiting for him. Her arms were crossed, and her expression was guarded. We need to talk, she said before he could even greet her. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. What's wrong? Anna glanced around the busy street, ensuring no one was within earshot, before speaking. Your friends were here yesterday. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. My friends? She nodded, her jaw tight. The ones you were with the first time you came here. They showed up, started asking questions. About me, about Chloe. They didn't say much, but it was clear they were digging. A surge of anger flared in Ethan's chest. He could picture Marcus orchestrating this. His smug grin as he tried to prove a point. I'm sorry, Anna, Ethan said, his voice firm. They had no right. I'm not looking for an apology, she interrupted, her tone sharp but not unkind. I just want to know why they're so interested. What are you telling them about me? Nothing, Ethan said quickly. I haven't told them anything. Marcus, he's the type who doesn't like to see people stepping outside his idea of what's normal. He's territorial. Anna's eyes narrowed. Territorial about what? You? Ethan hesitated, unsure how to explain. About the world he thinks we belong to. About me breaking the mold. Anna sighed, her frustration evident. Ethan, I don't know what's going on between us. But I don't want to be some experiment for you to prove a point to your friends. You're not, Ethan said earnestly. You're not an experiment, Anna. I come here because I want to, because I care about you. Her expression softened slightly, but her walls remained firmly in place. This is my life, Ethan. My daughter's life. I can't afford to have people like Marcus messing with it. I know, he said, stepping closer, and I'll make sure they don't. Promise. Anna studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. Finally, she nodded, though her posture remained tense. Okay, but if I see them here again, this ends. I mean it won't happen again, Ethan said. You have my word. That evening, Ethan confronted Marcus in a private corner of the bar they frequented. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips as Ethan approached. Here to thank me for looking out for you? Marcus quipped, raising his glass. What the hell were you thinking? Ethan snapped, his voice low but laced with fury. Going to her stall? Asking about her kid? That's crossing a line. Marcus shrugged, clearly unbothered. I was just trying to help. You're too close to see it, but you're making a mistake, Ethan. People like her, they'll drag you down. People like her? Ethan repeated, his fists clenching. You mean people who work hard, who take care of their families, who don't measure their worth in dollars and status symbols? Marcus's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly. You're being naive. She's not part of our world. She never will be. And the sooner you realize that, the better. Ethan shook his head, disgusted. Maybe I don't want to be part of this world anymore. Did you ever think of that? Marcus laughed, though there was no humor in it. Come on, Ethan. Don't kid yourself. You're as much a part of this world as I am. You can't just walk away from it. Watch me, Ethan said, his voice cold. He turned on his heel and left, leaving Marcus staring after him, his smirk finally gone. Over the next few weeks, Ethan focused on proving to Anna that he was serious. Not just about her, but about being a part of her life. He helped her redesign her stall, bringing in new materials to showcase her jewelry in a way that drew more customers. He even used his connections to secure her a spot in a weekend artisan market, a significant step up from her usual street corner. At first, Anna resisted, reluctant to accept his help. But as she saw the genuine effort he was putting in, and how much it meant to Chloe, she began to let him in. One evening, after the artisan market had closed, Ethan joined Anna and Chloe for dinner at their small apartment. It was a modest space, filled with the warmth of Anna's touch, handmade decorations, shelves lined with books and trinkets, and a faint aroma of lavender that seemed to permeate the air. Chloe, a bright-eyed 5-year-old with Anna's sharp wit, had warmed up to Ethan quickly. As they ate, she peppered him with questions about his work, his favorite foods, and whether he liked cats or dogs better. Anna watched the interaction with a soft smile, her usual guard lowered for once. It was a rare moment of peace, a glimpse of what life could be if she let herself believe in something more. After Chloe had gone to bed, Anna and Ethan sat on the couch, the quiet hum of the city filtering through the open window. For the first time, Anna allowed herself to ask the question that had been gnawing at her since the beginning. Why me? She asked softly. Ethan turned to her, his expression earnest. Because you're real. You don't care about my money or my connections. You see me for who I am, not what I have. And because you make me want to be better. Anna looked at him, her eyes glistening. For a moment, she said nothing, letting his words sink in. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Just don't make me regret this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You won't, Ethan promised, his voice steady. I swear. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Anna settled into a quiet rhythm. It wasn't perfect. Anna still had her moments of doubt, and Ethan was still learning how to navigate a world so different from his own. But they found solace in each other's company. Chloe adored Ethan, her laughter filling the small apartment whenever he visited. And for Anna, there was a growing sense of trust, a belief that maybe, just maybe, this could work. But the shadows of Ethan's old life lingered. Marcus hadn't let things go. Though he kept his distance from Anna's stall, his influence remained insidious. Rumors began to circulate in Ethan's social circle, whispers about his relationship with Anna and whether it was a phase or a lapse in judgment. Ethan ignored them as best he could, but the murmurs reached Anna eventually. One evening, as they sat together in her apartment, Anna's expression turned serious. "Do you think this is worth it?" she asked suddenly. Ethan looked up from the bracelet he had been admiring. "What do you mean?" Us," she said, gesturing between them. "Do you think it's worth all the backlash you're getting? I've heard the rumors, Ethan. People are talking. Your friends don't approve, and I don't fit into your world. So why are you still here?" Ethan set the bracelet down, his expression softening. "Because I don't care what they think. They don't know you like I do. They don't see how strong, how amazing you are. And honestly, if they can't understand that, then they're not really my friends." Anna frowned, her fingers twisting together. "But what if they're right? What if this doesn't work? You have everything to lose, and I don't know if I can handle being the reason you walk away from it all." Ethan reached out, taking her hands in his. "Anna, listen to me. The only thing I have to lose is a life I don't want anymore. You and Chloe, you've shown me what it means to have something real, something that matters. And I'd give up all of it. Every cent, every connection. If it meant being with you." Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "You don't know how much I want to believe that." "Then believe it," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Because it's the truth." While Anna struggled to fully trust his words, Ethan began taking quiet steps to sever ties with the toxic elements of his old life. He stopped attending the endless parties and galas, instead focusing on his work and his relationship with Anna and Chloe. He even sold his penthouse, opting for a smaller, more modest apartment closer to Anna's neighborhood. The decision sent shockwaves through his social circle. Marcus, in particular, was livid. "You're throwing it all away," Marcus shouted during a heated confrontation at their favorite bar. "For what? A woman who doesn't even belong in our world." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She belongs in my world. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you don't belong in it anymore." Marcus stared at him, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You've lost your mind. Maybe I've finally found it." Ethan shot back before walking out, leaving Marcus seething in his wake. As the months passed, Anna's jewelry business began to flourish. Thanks to Ethan's connections and her own hard work, she secured spots at local artisan markets and even began selling her pieces online. The extra income allowed her to spend more time with Chloe, a blessing she cherished more than she could express. Ethan was by her side every step of the way, not as a benefactor, but as a partner. He encouraged her, helped her brainstorm new designs, and celebrated every milestone with her and Chloe. But the piece they had built was fragile, and it wasn't long before it was tested. One evening, as Anna was closing up her stall, a man approached her. A slick, well-dressed figure she recognized immediately. "Marcus," she said, her voice cold. "Anna," he replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We finally meet. What do you want?" she asked, crossing her arms. Marcus chuckled, his gaze sweeping over her stall. "I just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. You must be something special to have Ethan so wrapped around your finger." Anna bristled but kept her composure. "If you've got something to say it. Otherwise, leave." "Feisty," Marcus said, clearly amused. "I can see why he likes you. But let me give you a little advice. People like you don't last in our world. And Ethan? He's playing a dangerous game. You might want to think about how this ends before you let him ruin his life." Anna's stomach churned, but she refused to let Marcus see her fear. "Ethan can make his own decisions. He doesn't need you speaking for him." Marcus smirked. "Maybe not. But when he realizes what he's given up for you, don't be surprised if he comes crawling back." Without waiting for a response, Marcus turned and walked away, leaving Anna standing in the dim glow of her stall lights. His words lingered long after he was gone, a seed of doubt taking root in her mind. That night, Anna sat on her couch, staring at the bracelet she had been working on earlier. Chloe was asleep in her room, and the apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. When Ethan arrived, she didn't greet him with her usual warmth. "What's wrong?" he asked, sensing the tension immediately. "Marcus came by," she said, her voice clipped. He had plenty to say about how this is all going to fall apart. Ethan's face darkened. "What did he say?" Anna shook her head. "It doesn't matter. What matters is, he's not wrong, Ethan. We're from two different worlds. Maybe we've been fooling ourselves this whole time." "We're not fooling ourselves," Ethan said firmly, sitting beside her. "Marcus is just trying to scare you because he's afraid of change." "But I'm not afraid, Anna. I know what I want." She looked at him, her eyes searching his. "And what if I'm the one who's afraid? Afraid of getting hurt? Of hurting Chloe? Of all of this falling apart?" Ethan reached for her hand, his grip gentle but steady. "Then we'll face it together. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." For a long moment, Anna said nothing, her heart torn between fear and hope. Finally, she nodded, her fingers tightening around his. "Okay." Ethan smiled, his relief palpable. "Okay." The tension following Marcus's visit lingered, but Ethan and Anna worked to push past it. For every moment of doubt, Ethan doubled down, showing Anna through his actions that he wasn't going anywhere. He became a constant presence in her life, not just for her but for Chloe, who had come to adore him like the father she never had. But Marcus wasn't done. One evening, as Anna was preparing dinner, Ethan received an unexpected call. He answered, his expression darkening almost immediately. "Marcus, what do you want?" "I'm calling to warn you," Marcus said smoothly. "There's a board meeting tomorrow. Word has gotten around that you've been distracted lately. Some of the shareholders aren't happy." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And let me guess, you're the one spreading those words?" "Me? No, of course not," Marcus replied, his tone feigning innocence. "But you can't blame people for asking questions, Ethan. You've been pulling away, making decisions that don't exactly scream stability. They're worried about the company." "What they're worried about," Ethan snapped, "is that I'm not playing by their rules anymore." "You can frame it however you want," Marcus said. "But if you don't show up tomorrow ready to assure them that you're still the man they've invested in, you're going to find yourself in trouble." Ethan ended the call without another word, his mind racing. The company was his father's legacy, the empire he had spent his entire life being groomed to lead. But now, for the first time, he questioned whether it was something he truly wanted. The next morning, Ethan sat at the head of the long, polished conference table, his gaze steady despite the tension in the room. Marcus sat across from him, flanked by several board members who had clearly aligned themselves with him. "Let's get to the point," one of the older members said, his voice sharp. "There's been concern about your recent behavior, Ethan. Your absences, your personal distractions. It's affecting the company." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression calm. "The company is performing better than ever. Profits are up, and we've closed more deals this quarter than in the last 2 years. So tell me, what exactly is the problem?" "The problem," Marcus interjected, "is perception. You've always been the face of this company, the example we hold up to clients and investors. And lately, that image has shifted." Ethan's gaze hardened. "Are you questioning my leadership?" "We're questioning your priorities," Marcus said, his voice measured but laced with smugness. "Your focus isn't where it used to be, and it's starting to show." The room fell silent, all eyes on Ethan. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. For years, this company had been his life. But now, sitting here, listening to Marcus and the others dissect his every move, he realized something. He didn't need this anymore. "You're right," Ethan said finally, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "My priorities have shifted. For years, I've lived my life according to everyone else's expectations. My father's, this board's, even yours, Marcus. But not anymore." The room erupted in murmurs, but Ethan raised a hand to silence them. "The company will survive without me. In fact, I think it'll be better off without someone who's no longer invested in this life. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down." Marcus's smirk faltered, replaced by genuine shock. "You're Stepping down? That's right, Ethan said, rising to his feet. Consider this my resignation. Without waiting for a response, he walked out of the room, leaving the stunned board members behind. Later that evening, Ethan arrived at Anna's apartment, a quiet determination in his eyes. She greeted him with a cautious smile, sensing something was different. "Everything okay?" she asked. Ethan nodded, stepping inside. "Better than okay. I finally did it." "Did what?" "I quit," he said simply. Anna stared at him, her brow furrowing. "Quit? Your job? The company?" Ethan nodded again, his smile growing. "It's not my life anymore, Anna. It hasn't been for a long time. And today, I finally realized I don't need it to define me." For a moment, Anna didn't know what to say. She had always feared that Ethan would be torn between his old life and the new one they were trying to build together. But now, hearing the certainty in his voice, she felt a wave of relief. "So what now?" she asked softly. "Now," Ethan said, reaching for her hand, "we start building something real. Together." The next few months were a whirlwind of change. With the company behind him, Ethan poured his energy into supporting Anna and Chloe. He helped Anna expand her business, securing her a spot in a high-profile artisan showcase that brought in more customers than she had ever imagined. Chloe, now thriving with both her mother and Ethan in her life, blossomed into a bright and happy child. But the changes weren't just practical. Ethan's relationship with Anna deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared dreams. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt free to be himself, free to love, and free to create a future that truly mattered. One evening, as they sat together on the small balcony of Anna's apartment, Chloe fast asleep in her room, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Anna's eyes widened as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Ethan, I know we've had our doubts," he said, his voice steady. "And I know this hasn't been easy. But I also know that I love you, Anna. You and Chloe have become my world, and I can't imagine my life without you. So I'm asking, will you marry me?" Tears filled Anna's eyes as she stared at him, her heart full. For so long, she had been afraid to hope for something like this. But now, looking into Ethan's eyes, she knew he was exactly where he wanted to be. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ethan smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms. For the first time in a long time, Anna allowed herself to believe in happily ever after. And this time, she knew it was real. The months leading up to their wedding were some of the happiest of Ethan and Anna's lives. Ethan had thrown himself wholeheartedly into planning a future that included not only Anna but also Chloe. The three of them had become a family in every sense of the word. Chloe, bright-eyed and full of life, had taken to calling Ethan Dad, a word that filled him with more pride than any accolade or title ever could. Their lives had changed in ways they never expected. Anna's jewelry business had grown exponentially. Her online store was thriving, and she had been invited to showcase her work in several prestigious exhibitions. Despite the success, Anna remained humble, still working at her stall, a few days a week to stay connected to the community that had supported her from the beginning. Ethan, too, had found his footing. Free from the corporate world, he began consulting for small businesses, using his skills to help others grow and succeed. It was a far cry from his old life, but it was infinitely more fulfilling. On a warm summer afternoon, under the canopy of a sprawling oak tree, Ethan and Anna exchanged their vows. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended by close friends, family, and a few of the vendors from Anna's market who had become like a second family to her. Anna looked radiant in a simple yet elegant dress, her hair adorned with a delicate crown of flowers. Ethan, standing tall and confident, couldn't take his eyes off her. When she walked down the makeshift aisle, Chloe holding her hand, he felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. The officiant began, but Ethan barely heard the words. His focus was entirely on Anna, her smile, her warmth, and the quiet strength that had drawn him to her from the beginning. When it was time to exchange vows, he spoke from the heart. "Anna, meeting you changed my life. You reminded me of what it means to truly live, to love, and to be loved in return. You showed me a world I didn't know I was missing, and for that, I will be forever grateful. I promise to stand by you, to support you, and to cherish you every day for the rest of our lives." Anna's eyes glistened with tears as she responded, her voice steady despite the emotion in her words. "Ethan, you walked into my world when I least expected it and showed me that love isn't something to fear, it's something to fight for. You've given me and Chloe a family, a home, and a future filled with hope. I promise to love you, to believe in you, and to grow with you, no matter where life takes us." The vows were sealed with a kiss, and the crowd erupted into cheers. Chloe clapped enthusiastically, running into their arms as they turned to face their loved ones as husband and wife. In that moment, surrounded by the people who mattered most, Ethan and Anna felt an overwhelming sense of peace and happiness. As the reception unfolded, the laughter and joy were infectious. Marcus had not been invited, a deliberate decision that symbolized Ethan's firm separation from his old life. Instead, the room was filled with people who truly cared for them, people who had supported their journey and understood the love that had brought them together. Ethan watched as Anna danced with Chloe, her laughter ringing out over the soft hum of music. He marveled at how much his life had changed since that first day he had stumbled upon her stall. He thought about the sacrifices, the doubts, and the challenges they had faced, and he realized that every single one of them had been worth it. Later that night, as the celebration wound down and the last guests departed, Ethan and Anna sat together beneath the oak tree. The sky was clear, the stars twinkling like tiny jewels against the velvet darkness. Chloe had fallen asleep in Anna's lap, her small hand clutching the corner of Ethan's jacket. "This is everything I ever wanted," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Anna smiled, her gaze drifting from Chloe to him. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the moment sinking in. For the first time in their lives, they felt whole, complete in a way that neither of them had thought possible. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't stopped at your stall that day?" Ethan asked after a while. Anna chuckled. "Honestly, I would have probably rolled my eyes at another guy in a suit and gone on with my day." Ethan laughed, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "Well, I'm glad I was persistent." "So am I," Anna said, her voice soft. "So am I." As they sat together under the stars, their future stretched out before them like a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a life well lived. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Their story was not one of wealth or status, but of two people who found each other in the most unexpected of places. It was a story of resilience, of love that defied expectations, and of a family that chose each other against all odds. It was their story, and it was perfect.